My name is Sarina. Thank you for having me today. I wanted to chat a little bit with you about the untapped potential in maximizing disability employment in Canada. Poverty due to disability is a significant yet often overlooked issue, compounded by systemic barriers or misconceptions. Tackling it requires collaboration amongst three stakeholders: the employee, the employers, and government, each with a vital role in supporting individuals with disabilities and reducing poverty in this group. Today, as we come together with a common purpose to unlock the untapped potential that emerges when people with disabilities are empowered to contribute their skills, creativity, and leadership to Canada's workforce. To do that, we must look very closely at these three stakeholders who hold the power to drive change. Disabled Canadians bring a unique perspective and problem-solving abilities, efficiency, and resilience that strengthens teams and uses diversity as a driver of innovation. Through inclusion and empowerment, not tokenism, it requires access to a culture where people can disclose their needs without fear of stigma or exclusion. Representation matters. When you can see it, you can become it. And when people with disabilities are included in leadership, policy development, and decision making, workplaces become more responsive and equitable for everyone. Employees and employers can help close the employment gap that fuels poverty amongst Canadians with disabilities. The good news, though, is that support already exists. Across Canada, programs and incentives help employers hire, retain, and train employees with disabilities. What's needed now is awareness, education, and commitment, because progress only happens when knowledge turns into daily action. The government are both gatekeepers and enablers, and through policy, funding, and leadership, it sets the stage for inclusion to become the norm and not the exception. And when government leads with vision and partnership, it enables real progress on poverty reduction and workplace inclusion. Disabled Canadians shouldn't have to fight for the right to work, yet often inclusion exists on paper while we remain invisible in practice. Canada promises fundamental rights, economic security, and quality of life through its constitution and laws. Yet we fall short on these promises. Accessibility is not a buzzword. It's infrastructure of equality. And as we learn from one another today, share stories and build partnerships to create positive change, let's remember, disability inclusion is not about removing barriers. It's about unlocking potential that belongs to individuals, our economy, and shared future. At this pivotal moment, amid global shifts in trade, technology, and demographics, Canada's success depends on our ability to innovate, to adapt, and work together. Recognizing disability employment as an opportunity, not a challenge, strengthens us all. This is a group project. So let's dive into the first stakeholder, the disabled employee, focusing on strengths and commitment. Employees with disabilities are often unfairly seen through a lens of limitation rather than capability. We bring a unique value to the workforce, and it's crucial to shift focus from what we can't do to what we can. By proactively advocating for accommodations, using assistive technology, and requesting flexibility, employees with disabilities can thrive. Clear communication with employers, paired with a commitment to performance and integrity, allows us to navigate challenges while demonstrating loyalty, tenacity, and high-quality work. Many employees with disabilities show exceptional dedication, standing out as invaluable contributors whose distinct strengths, perspectives, and problem-solving skills enrich workplaces and drive innovation. Success begins with empowerment. Self-advocacy often requires educating employers, policymakers, and legislative bodies about our unique disabilities, visible or invisible, and what we need to succeed. For example, employees with invisible conditions may require flexible work arrangements, such as remote work, which should be treated as legitimate needs, not exceptions. It should be the standard. Yet, Statistics Canada in 2022 reported that 11% of workers with disabilities needed remote work accommodations, which were rarely approved, and an ongoing equity issue under Canada's human rights framework. The bridge. Accessibility is the bridge between potential and participation, and without it, talent remains on the sidelines. With it, everyone can move forward together with opportunity, and knowledge of existing services, rights, and responsibilities under the duty to accommodate, combined with honest workplace communication, allows for effective accommodations. When workplaces nurture these strengths, disability inclusion becomes more than compliance, it becomes a strategic advantage. According to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2006, quote, reasonable accommodation means necessary and appropriate modifications and adjustments, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden to ensure persons with disabilities enjoy all human rights on an equal basis with others. Accommodations adjust how someone performs the task without changing expectations, like extra time, assistive software, or flexible schedules or locations. Yet, on the other hand, modifications adjust what is done, like simplified tasks or different assignments. Leveraging assistive technologies, flexible arrangements, and inclusive communication helps employees perform at full potential, often exceeding expectations in creativity, adaptability, perseverance, efficiency, and most importantly, productivity. Employees with disabilities consistently demonstrate commitment and integrity, lowering onboarding costs, showing higher retention productivity than non-disabled colleagues. Self-advocacy can follow the asset-based community development model, ABCD principles, which shift focus from deficits to strengths within individuals and workplaces. They identify individual assets in terms of recognizing unique skills and experiences beyond medical limitations. They utilize workplace assets in terms of leveraging supportive managers, flexible policies, and team skills. They can foster community relationships. They can encourage open communication and collaboration. And they can co-create solutions, work with employees to design effective and sustainable accommodations. The asset-based accommodation examples could look like restructuring tasks to align with strengths, flexible schedules or remote work, modifying physical workplaces, and providing adaptive technology. Unlike need-based approaches that focuses on deficits and external fixes, asset-based strengths maximize existing strengths for proactive solutions. Employers who embrace this approach move beyond legal minimum to require inclusive, supportive workplaces. When employees with disabilities can advocate for themselves, access tools, and grow professionally, they don't just succeed, they elevate the whole entire workplace. We're not asking for special treatment, we're asking for equal footing. And the government keeps saying later, while our lives are happening now. Every inaccessible workplace is a message that our talent doesn't matter here. And when the government looks away, it agrees. Now on to our second shareholder and stakeholder, the employer. Moving beyond tokenism and embracing inclusivity. Employers must recognize that disabilities extend beyond physical impairments. Invisible disabilities, such as mental health conditions or chronic illnesses, require attention and understanding by educating themselves. Employers can avoid tokenism and create inclusive workplaces that accommodate diverse needs. Concerns about productivity or accommodation costs can be addressed through open communication and evidence-based practices. Research shows that employees with disabilities often exceed expectations when supporting, boosting morale, and contributing to organizational success. A truly supportive employer reduces disability-related poverty while enhancing culture, innovation, and productivity. Inclusive employers foster environments where employees can safely disclose their needs, replacing assumptions with understanding and performative inclusion with authentic engagement. Misconceptions about feasibility, remote work, and productivity can be overcome. As the pandemic clearly has shown, flexibility often improves outcomes. Expecting everyone to conform to one model, like asking all employees to climb the same tree, only widens the systemic inequalities and inequities. Let's dive into some strategies for Canadian employers. Here are three. One, leadership alignment. Accessibility must be a business priority. When leadership openly champions inclusion, signals that accessibility matters to all levels. Integrate accessibility into every employment stage, from job postings to professional development, using frameworks like the Canadian Human Rights Commission's Duty to Accommodate and the Accessible Canada Act, the ACA. Real compliance requires practical steps. Alternative entry formats, plain language posting, and flexible accommodations tailored to individual needs. Number two, education and awareness. Train employees, managers, and human resources staff on disability, inclusion, accessibility etiquette, and unconscious bias. Build awareness into onboarding, leadership development, and ongoing learning programs to minimize fear and broad understanding. Support for employers can include subsidies for inclusive training, accommodation planning, and inclusive culture initiatives. Key elements could include manager and HR training on accessibility and inclusive hiring on an ongoing basis, not as a one-off, one-day training, anti-bias and sensitivity education, employee resource groups and inclusion committees, and clear documented accommodation policies. Strategy number three, leverage federal and provincial incentives. Programs like the Opportunities Fund for Persons with Disabilities, the Workplace Accessibility Stream, and the provincial initiatives to offset accommodation and hiring costs. Proactively using these resources enables businesses to invest in accessibility without financial strain. By embracing inclusion as a driver of innovation, not a compliance checkbox or checklist, Canadian employers can strengthen workplaces and promote social equity. Accessibility benefits everyone. It enhances engagement, creativity, and organizational success while reducing poverty. Employers play a pivotal role in transforming workplaces from symbolic inclusion to systemic belonging. Expecting employees to perform without accommodations is like giving the same workers missing tools. Equity means providing the right tools for each person's abilities, not identical tools. And this brings fairness and equity. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for equal footing. Inclusion delayed is opportunity denied. Inclusion delayed is opportunity denied. And disabled Canadians have waited long enough. Canada calls itself inclusive, yet disabled workers remain excluded, while organizations use buzzwords and checklists. True inclusion requires transforming workplace culture so everyone can belong and thrive. And on to our third stakeholder, the government. Legislation and incentives for inclusion. Government action is pivotal in addressing poverty related to disability. Our government must prioritize education on what constitutes a disability, clarifying what disability truly means. Too often, invisible disabilities such as mental health conditions, chronic illnesses, or neurodivergence are often overlooked in policy and practice. Governments at all levels must expand public understanding of disability beyond physical impairments. This education should reach employers and employees, service providers, and the public to dispel misconceptions, reduce stigma, and promote equitable opportunity, and should also have employees at the table. In 2018, Canada launched its first national poverty reduction strategy, Opportunity for All, establishing a poverty line and setting targets. A 20% reduction by 2020 and a 50% reduction by 2030, compared to the 2015 baseline levels. As the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives clearly points out that this showed that poverty is not inevitable. It's a policy choice. End quote. Yet recent progress has stalled, and Canada risks missing its 2030 goal as poverty rates rise drastically, potentially slipping below the 2020 benchmark that is already achieved. Writers Jasmine Rizé and Leila Sabari stated that the issue isn't a lack of policy, but a lack of urgency. And especially given the recent news that especially the Bank of Canada's Governor Tiff Malcolm warns that Canadians need to accept a lower standard of living. How much lower must disabled Canadians endure? To get back on track, Canada must quickly act. They should make disability a funded pillar of the poverty strategy under the opportunity for all. In the same policy and strategy, they should remove the benefit cliffs and redesign income supports, which we'll get to in a little bit. Improve data reporting and expand and modernize employment supports, enforcement, and employer assistance. If by 2016, Canada pilots and starts a benefit cliff reforms and continues executing the strategy, then by 2028, cutting the employment gap for disabled Canadians by 25% and delivering affordable housing, we can meet the original 2030 goal. We just cannot be pausing on this right now. We need to keep this moving forward. And we can be reducing poverty by 50% to meet that 2030 goal, which will, from the 2015 baseline, which will then align us with the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. Maximizing disability employment and modernizing supports in reduce poverty, close employment gaps, and strengthen the economy, especially amid current economic concerns. We must not lose sight of this opportunity to rely on every Canadian's unique strengths and contributions. Legislation in the Disability Inclusion Action Plan. Legislation plays a vital role. Enforcement has a duty to accommodate enshrined in the Canadian Human Rights Act and the Accessible Canada Act. The ACA must be consistent and transparent. Stronger recourse mechanisms, including protections against constructive dismissal or retaliation, ensure fairness without fear of reprisal. In 2022, Canada launched its first Disability Inclusion Action Plan, the DIAP, to build a barrier-free Canada by 2040, organized under 4 pillars: financial security, employment, accessible and inclusive communities, and a modern approach to disability. The DIAP emphasizes that inclusive workplaces, equal opportunity, and fairness across federally regulated sectors, financial incentives and income security measures must evolve to reflect the realities of disability and work. Subsidies for workplace accessibility and reforms to disability benefits can empower participation while preserving stability and dignity. Let's dive into some policy recommendations for the Canadian government and governments. 1. Strengthen legislation enforcement. Mandate stronger accommodation requirements under the ACA by clarifying undue hardship, reducing employer discretion, streamline provincial human rights processes. We're delays of 12 to 36 months deny timeline justice. Justice delayed is justice denied. Explore quota systems as used in Germany and France, requiring employers to hire a percentage of people with disabilities or pay a levy. It enforces anti-discrimination laws through meaningful penalties to ensure accountability, ownership, and to close employment gaps. Number 2, coordinate and integrate standards. The ACA provides a national framework, but effectiveness depends on harmonization with provincial and territorial laws. Federal leadership should align standards, share best practices, and enforce compliance through audits, accessible complaint systems, and public progress reporting. Consistency across jurisdictions will benefit both the employers and employees. Number 3, expand financial incentives and accessibility grants. Building on the Opportunities Fund and Canada Disability Benefit, the CDB, governments can introduce targeted subsidies for small and medium-sized enterprises to offset accommodation costs, tax credits for renovations, grants for adaptive tools, and wage subsidies for inclusive hiring will remove financial barriers and grow the labor force. And four, reform income and employment supports to encourage work. Disability-related poverty persists because benefits penalize work. Raising the annual earnings exemption, the AEE, under CPP disability and harmonizing the provincial support programs with the new CDB, the Canada Disability Benefit, would let individuals retain more income without losing the essential supports right away, i.e., the cliff. Modifying clawbacks on a sliding scale, for example, 30 to 50 cents on the dollar, and indexing exemptions to inflation would ensure smoother transitions to employment, making the transition more sustainable. Programs should allow for pause benefits for fluctuating employment or health, reducing bureaucratic reapplications that drain both individuals, the health, and the government systems. Efficient, flexible supports empower disabled Canadians to work without risking survival and create a safety net. When governments lead with inclusive policy, collaboration, and accountability, it sets the tone for the entire nation. Through strong legislation, financial supports, and public education, Canada can build a future where disability no longer predicts poverty, but where inclusion, innovation, and equity and equality define our workplace. We can do better. For Canadians with disabilities, the government can be the hand that lifts us or the wall that stops us, and too often it's both. Accessibility isn't optional, it's our right. Every delay and every refusal, every loophole is a door slammed in your face. We don't need sympathy, we need action. And to close off for today, tackling disability-related poverty requires collaboration. Employees must be empowered to focus on their strengths, self-advocate, and access the tools they need to fully participate in the workforce. Employers must move beyond the outdated perceptions, embrace inclusion as a source of innovation, and recognize accommodations like remote work as a standard practice. The Canadian government must strengthen legislation, oversight, and financial incentives to make accessibility expected, not optional. When employees, employers, and the government act together, Canada can transform its employment landscape, where people with disabilities are not merely accommodated, but actively valued and supported. The Canadian workplace is like a puzzle. Each puzzle is unique but essential. And when one piece is missing, the picture is incomplete. True inclusion ensures every person fits and contributes. And as Gandhi has said, a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members. By removing barriers, we unlock the potential of millions of Canadians, enriching workplaces, strengthening communities, and building a more equitable, prosperous society in Canada. Thank you for your time.